My litmus test is that when our students graduate from Rochester, they can say not only did they get a good education that prepared them for whatever it is, because I think too many times that we just say college is the benchmark, right? That's important, and I want to make sure that if that's an option for my students, that they understand it's an option. But whether it's a 2-year or 4-year, if they go into the military or if they go right into the world of work, that they feel like they are more than adequately prepared for that. But yes, is it a monumental task? It is, but I want to say this, it's a monumental task that I believe that we can move through if we have everyone rowing in the same direction. The bottom line, that centering focus, and the board's also in that stakeholder group, that we're bettering outcomes for our kids. And that I can't say it any more direct or plain than that. That's why I'm in this. This is not a stepping stone superintendency. This is not for, fame or anything like that. I want to make Rochester a viable district that has its students coming out on the other side ready for whatever that is after they graduate. I'm not one to make, especially with a topic and the issues and the concerns that they present. This is something that I'm not going to rush, and that I need to really be thoughtful about it. It's not a stall tactic. It's not that I don't want to address it, because it is, Patty, something that is definitely on my mind. And I will tell you personally, I am struggling right now. I've been very clear about that. I don't know if you saw the video I did on Twitter, and I've written to my staff. I have a Black husband. I have 2 Black stepsons. I have a Black nephew, friends, colleagues, other relatives. I'm very afraid right now of what's going on, and it's really on my heart and my mind. So these issues of racism, anti-racism, institutional and historical racism are absolutely on my mind. A superintendent absolutely has to partner with different entities, right? I need to partner with parents. I need to, because I have their greatest treasure. I need to partner with others who have maybe expertise even beyond what I have. So, minimally, certainly in an advisory capacity of, calling the question and pointing out some of the issues from an external viewpoint, I think are incredibly helpful. But it's really hard to say, how do I feel about what their place should be in the district until I've had a meaningful and thoughtful conversation with them. The word that comes to mind is this: it's a symbiotic relationship. So symbiotic means it's mutually agreeable and that they're connected, but there are things that we certainly work on and there are things that they work on. And it's almost like when the Venn diagram comes together and we have that crossover. Symbiotic. We can say that our teachers need to have professional development on connecting better with their students and understanding their own kind of internal bias and attitudes towards our students. But if we don't have ample time to be able to do that, no matter how great the training is, no matter how in-depth it is, we've got to make those. So I have a systemic issue on top of that, right, of making sure that I can have training happen. I think, honestly, what also complicates this is the elephant in the room. We're in the midst of COVID-19, right? So we might not even be back online come September. We've got this issue of institutional racism where we have just the most recent death of George Floyd, but many other Black and brown men have been killed, murdered at the hands of police. We've got to figure out how we can be reactive, right, to this situation that's happened. And we wanted to make sure that we put mental health supports in place. So this entire week at each one of our 13 food sites, we have a mental health practitioner, a social worker there who's working with our students. And they have been trained in dealing with racism and especially racism as it relates to trauma, right? So that is an equity issue. I can't just send any social worker there. They have to understand the trauma that this brings to our students. So we have that, we have Zoom rooms, and actually I believe today or tomorrow, I will be meeting with our student leaders to talk about the trauma and from their perspective, even though, you know, as adults, we think we have all these great ideas. I need to hear from my scholars. And so I'll be meeting with them on Zoom to hear about how can we move forward? What are things that we can do internally? And I'm sure they're going to touch on institutional racism. I'm sure they're going to touch on, you know, issues that impact them coming from their perspective. So absolutely, we can't wait. And you know, and I'm calling the question. But if we're going to say we're going to develop this professional development training module for our teachers when I don't know if they will physically be present, we've got to just be thoughtful and wait just a little bit to see how might we best achieve that and do that in a very meaningful way. The other thing is that we absolutely have to call the question with our educators. But I believe that, you know, you can, I love this, this saying. The saying says, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But the caveat is, then let's figure out how to make the horse thirsty. And that's where I am right now. How do I figure out how to make our educators thirsty? I think given what's going on right now, that's giving us some thirst, right? And that is kind of pushing us towards figuring out what those strategies are. And again, I look forward to working collaboratively with the real team to figure out how we do that in a way that is meaningful and that has results. I'm very concerned about this, but this is taking time. And whereas I realize that they've been dealing with this for years, everyone has to be mindful that I am just coming to the table. And I get that it's a hurry, but don't rush type of situation. But I want to be very thoughtful about this and figure out so it can be meaningful, because I don't want it to be an acrimonious relationship. I don't want it to not be meaningful. I want it to be a meaningful relationship and that we will effect change, because the bottom line, it is about our kids. But I want to say this, and this might be controversial. I believe in the saying that it's hard to be it if you can't see it, right? So we certainly need to improve the diverse makeup of our district, but our world is not predominantly Black and brown at this point, right? That that we have other folks. And so I want my students to be exposed to not only African-American and Latinx educators, whether it's teachers or counselors or social workers, administrators, et cetera. But I also need to make sure that if you're not in that subgroup, because that doesn't necessarily qualify you as an excellent teacher. Just because you come from that group does not necessarily mean that you understand where you've come from, right? But I want to make sure that my educators, no matter what the racial or ethnic or socioeconomic background, that they do have the training that they need to work with the wonderful diversity that we have in the district. So I get a little frustrated sometimes when, and I don't want to superimpose this on real, but we can't make the assumption that just because our educators are Black and brown, that they understand what they need to do with our students either, because that's not always the case.